Salam sejahtera bersama saya Rizal Zulkafli dan ini Niaga AWANI. Kita mulakan dengan perkembangan terkini dari Jawatan Kuasa Khas Jaminan Akses Bekalan Vaksin COVID-19. 67.4% populasi dewasa terima 1 dos dan 37.5% lengkap 2 dos vaksin sehingga semalam. 389,000 dos vaksin diberikan pada Ahad dan jumlah terkumpul dos adalah 24.542 juta. Jumlah populasi divaksin dengan dos pertama adalah 48.3% dan 26.9% lengkap 2 dos. Laporan penuh di astroawani.com dan juga buletin awani akan datang. Dan seterusnya, saham di pasaran Asia Pasifik dilapor dibuka rendah untuk dagangan pagi ini dengan pelabur terus memfokuskan kepada angka terkini COVID-19. Sementara itu, Bursa Malaysia dijangka terus alami dagangan berhati-hati minggu ini dengan indeks penanda aras bergerak dalam julat 1,490 hingga 1,500 mata. Menurut ahli ekonomi Bank Islam Malaysia, Berhad ada Mohamed yang dipetik bernama, dalam keadaan sentimen yang lemah, pelabur akan terus memantau jumlah kes COVID-19 yang tinggi di negara ini. Ini selain perkembangan mengenai tindakan tegas pihak kawal selia China terhadap sektor pendidikan dan juga teknologi. Beliau berkata bagaimanapun minggu ini penting bagi pasaran memandangkan data keluaran dalam negara kasar Malaysia untuk suku kedua 2021 akan dikeluarkan oleh Bank Negara Malaysia pada 13 Ogos ini. Ada menjangkakan pasaran tidak mengalami banyak perubahan memandangkan pelabur akan menunggu data KDNK tersebut. Selain Malaysia, negara lain seperti Filipina, Taiwan, Singapura dan Hong Kong juga akan mengeluarkan angka KDNK suku kedua 2021 masing-masing minggu ini. Dan seterusnya, ringgit dijangka diniagakan pada paras semasa berbanding dolar Amerika minggu ini menjelang pengumuman data KDNK Malaysia suku kedua pada 13 Ogos ini. Menurut ahli ekonomi Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad ada Mohamed yang dipetik bernama, pergerakan ringgit dijangka mengalami cabaran minggu ini dan diniagakan dalam julat 4.22 hingga 4.23 berbanding dolar Amerika. Beliau juga berkata susulan tiada tanda-tanda kes COVID-19 akan berkurangan, mata wang tempatan akan terus menghadapi tekanan. Bagi dagangan yang baru berakhir, ringgit diniagakan tinggi kebanyakannya minggu ini ataupun minggu lepas sejajar dengan peningkatan harga minyak mentah Brent. Dan kontrak niaga hadapan minyak mentah atau minyak sawit mentah MSM di Bursa Malaysia Derivatives dijangka berada dalam aliran rendah minggu ini susulan aktiviti pengambilan untung. Peniaga minyak sawit kanan Interbank Group of Companies Jimteh yang dipetik bernama berkata stok dijangka kekal tinggi di Malaysia dan Indonesia berikutan permintaan berkurangan dari negara lain. Dan beliau menjangka pergerakan harga pada minggu ini diunjurkan kecil antara RM3,800 dan RM3,900 satu tan. Peniaga minyak sawit David Eng pula menjangka niaga hadapan MSM berada pada kecenderungan meningkat menjelang laporan tanaman utama itu yang akan dikeluarkan minggu ini. Jangkaan Eng tidak selari dengan unjuran Teh apabila beliau lebih positif terhadap prospek harga MSM dan menjangka komoditi tersebut diniagakan di antara RM4,080 dengan RM4,350 satu tan dalam jangka pendek. Awal minggu ini ataupun minggu lepas, CGS CIMB Securities dan Berhad mengunjurkan harga MSM kekal kukuh pada RM3,500 hingga RM4,000 satu tan bagi Ogos. Dan Maybank Islamic Bhd pada 21 Julai lepas melancarkan penyelesaian pengurusan kekayaan patuh syariah IWM komprehensif untuk memenuhi permintaannya semakin meningkat terhadap pelaburan dan penyelesaian patuh syariah di negara ini. Menerusi kenyataan, institusi perbankan itu menjelaskan penyelesaian itu merangkumi 5 elemen penting IWM iaitu penciptaan kekayaan, pengumpulan harta, pelindungan harta, penyucian harta dan pengagihan harta. Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Maybank Islamic, Datuk Mohamed Rafique, Merican berkata pelancaran penyelesaian komprehensif tersebut adalah khusus untuk memenuhi keperluan pelanggan dan juga tidak terhad kepada pelanggan yang mempunyai kepercayaan dan gaya hidup dengan memilih tawaran berasaskan syariah sahaja. Maybank Islamic menjelaskan setiap pelanggan IWM akan dilayan oleh penasihat kekayaan yang diperakui oleh Perancang Kewangan Islam IFP dalam memberikan nasihat untuk mencari produk dan perkhidmatan yang sesuai dengan keperluan pelanggan. Dan kita ingin bincangkan berkenaan dengan kewangan Islam dan penyelesaian yang ada untuk pelanggan pada ketika ini bersama dengan Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Maybank Islamic Bhd, Datuk Mohamed Rafique Merican. Izinkan saya meneruskan dalam bahasa Inggeris. Datuk, first of all, tell us about the IMW and whether there is a lack of Islamic solutions out there.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning. Thank you, Rizal, for inviting me to AWANI Niaga. So, based on what we're seeing, in terms of the offerings that are currently being offered, it is widespread, and the response has actually been encouraging. One of the things that we wanted to also do is how do we actually also grow the relationship that we have with our customers. So, if I can expand a little more in terms of what we're seeing within the Islamic finance industry, over the last 30 years since it was introduced, Islamic finance has actually achieved systemic importance and relevance. So this has been acknowledged by Fitch Ratings Agency, the international rating agency, and even if I look at by segment, Islamic banking assets, for example, at the end of last year, it has actually achieved about 34.2% of the total assets of the banking system.
But tell us more about the Islamic money market and also the Islamic banking system. Do you have enough products for the needs of the customers out there?
Yes, okay. So in terms of the offerings, we started out, I think, 30 years ago in the industry, offering products which would meet the needs of retail customers as well as a broad base of corporates. And over the years, the industry has started to actually mature, where we are starting to actually offer products which differentiate Islamic finance from conventional. So when we started, I think what was important was how do we be relevant to the segments that we're serving. So you would have, for example, within the retail segment of customers wanting to actually have Sharia compliant financing solutions to actually buy a house, to buy a car, to also have an Islamic credit card, for example. So in terms of the purpose of that facility, it must be relevant to the customer. And from a corporate perspective, we must also be able to actually offer products which would meet their requirements and their needs. And Alhamdulillah, I think in terms of the number that I shared with you just now, as at the end of last year, the value of Islamic financing to the total assets to the total banking system is in excess of 1 trillion ringgit. And in terms of momentum, for example, what we're seeing is last year, from a financing perspective, Islamic finance grew at about 8.5%, and conventional grew at about 0.5%. So there is greater acceptance in terms of the product offering. And then secondly is in terms of looking at the importance of the Islamic finance offering within our banking system. I think that has been well established, and I think the journey continues.
But tell us about the awareness of Islamic banking products and services among the Muslim themselves here in Malaysia. After 30 years, do you think there's enough understanding of Islamic banking products and services among these customers?
Okay, in terms of level of acceptance, it's very high. So if I can share with you some observations that we have seen, out of say about almost 12 million customers that we have within Maybank, about 71% actually has got at least one Islamic financing facility. And within that segment, 3 million are non-Muslims. And we believe that the reason why there is a strong affinity for Islamic finance, there is one bucket that actually looks at, from a belief and a faith standpoint, wanting to take on Sharia compliant financing. And then there is also the other segment that looks at fair pricings and competitive terms. And we believe that if Islamic finance can actually show that distinction in terms of fair pricing, in terms of differentiated terms that meets with the customer's requirements, expectation, we don't see a reason why Islamic finance cannot also be a default choice for those which are not necessarily driven by faith. The other segment that I wanted to also maybe highlight here is the fact that in 2019, we did a study with an international investment firm, Schroders, in terms of the alignment between sustainable financing or sustainable investing principles and the objectives of Sharia. And we found that based on that study, the alignment between sustainable investing and the objectives of Sharia, the 5 elements that Islamic financial institutions are pursuing, it overlaps very well. There are significant similarities. For example, in terms of social equality, in terms of concern about the financing that is being provided, is it being used in a manner which is consistent with how we protect the environment? So there is the element of fair terms and pricing, and result. There is also the other element whereby sustainability and the principles that are being applied under Sharia financing are very consistent. And we hope to actually continue to have similar collaborations with those institutions coming from the mainstream financial services industry to see how we can increase the level of awareness and also get the consumer to be more familiar with what Islamic finance actually represents.
You mentioned sustainable investing earlier, and I think you also mentioned the word environment earlier. Let's talk about ESG and whether Islamic banking or Islamic banks globally are also embracing that. Should that be easily applied to Islamic banking? Because I think the elements should be there, right?
It is. It has always been there. I think, Rizal, if you take a look at the objectives of Sharia, so there is the element of deen, which is the religion. There is the element of property. There is the element of intellect. There is the element of progeny. So those elements actually talks about how do we actually care for the environment and future generations. Now, if the financing that is provided by financial institutions, for example, helps to actually make it more detrimental to the community, to the environment, to the planet, then I think we are not doing our part. So when we look at the objectives of Sharia and the alignment with sustainability, it is very well aligned. In fact, I think if you ask me the question of what is next moving forward, it is the increasing realization that we have a sense of purpose, that we need to also be responsible for our activities and how we leave behind our legacy for future generations.
Datuk, before we talk about the IWM solutions that you launched, I think about last week or 2 weeks before, let's also go a bit deeper and look at the, when we compare conventional banking solutions with Islamic banking solutions, do we really, or can customers really see the competitive advantage of being part of the Islamic finance solution ecosystem?
I believe so. If you take a look at some of the terms which have been approved by the Sharia Committee and Sharia scholars, for example, the element of compounding is prohibited. So you find that even under the current situation whereby assistance is being provided to borrowers, the element of compounding comes from the Islamic finance system because there is that prohibition. The other one is in terms of the contract itself, whereby any changes to a contract would need to be mutually agreed. So you find that one of the Sharia expectations is if there are any changes as you enter into a new contract, for example, the customer needs to be aware so that there is at least a mutual consent to enter into any changes or arrangements. That's one. And then the other one is there are elements within Islamic finance, perhaps, which is not as well be known out there. Like for example, we have products which have got an element of charity or helping the community. So as you know, Rizal Islamic financial institutions, they actually pay zakat out of the profits or the asset base that we have. And the intention there is that as the Islamic financial institutions actually grow, as the customers continue to support Islamic financial institutions, by the Islamic financial institutions to assist and help the community, whether it's from a direct living expenses subsistence kind of support, all the way to education, and all the way to also Islamic social finance.
Datuk, we'll take a short break. When we come back, let's talk about how you can also, or whether you are, still trying to get non-Muslims as part of your customers. You mentioned about 3 million. You have about 3 million customers in the Islamic finance ecosystem at Maybank. Do you want to get more non-Muslim customers, and how do you convince them to get the products offered by Maybank Islamic, and also the recently launched Islamic Wealth Management solution? We'll talk about that when we come back. Kita akan berehat seketika, kembali selepas ini. Bertemu kembali, kita bersama dengan Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Maybank Islamic Bhd, Datuk Mohamed Rafique Merican, membincangkan berkenaan dengan inovasi dan juga penyelesaian yang ditawarkan Kewangan Islam untuk pelanggan pada ketika ini. Datuk, let's come back to that question earlier. Why are you what are you offering to appeal to the non-Muslims as customers of Maybank Islamic products and solutions? Do you plan to increase the non-Muslims customers, and if so, is there a particular target, and how are you planning to do this?
I think for us, we take a look at the Islamic finance solution or financial products as a universal product. There will be that group, as I mentioned earlier, who wants to actually go purely for Sharia compliant solutions. But also, we want to appeal to those groups who actually look at the value proposition of Islamic finance as something which appeals to their own values, not just because of pricing, not just because of terms. And how we do this is, I think a lot more can be done within the space of Islamic finance for Islamic financial institution to actually differentiate itself. And some of the evidence of this that we have actually seen, for example, is in the space of our offerings. In 2010, we embarked on our Islamic First strategy, and by momentum. So we look at this from the perspective of new financing that we actually book on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis, quite a high proportion actually under Islamic finance. Like for example, for unit trust financing, for auto financing, more than 90% of new bookings to the Maybank Malaysia, for example, is under Islamic. And mortgages, for example, is 60%. So there is a high level of acceptance for Islamic financial solutions, and we believe that, notwithstanding that it is a strategy by Maybank, the product on its own must be able to stand and test the scrutiny of our customers. So if they believe, for example, that based on pricing, based on the terms, as well as the values and the benefits they can actually derive from having an Islamic finance facility, then I believe we are on the right track. And what we intend to actually continue moving forward is starting to actually introduce products which differentiate Islamic finance from the conventional space. And one example is, as I mentioned to you just now, there are elements like, for example, our Ikhwan credit card, whereby 0.1% of the spend of the customer is channeled towards charitable purposes. So we've done, for example, programs last year with the healthcare services industry for PPE, for example. And then this year, we actually also using those funds to contribute to those who are most impacted by the recent pandemic. There are other products as well in the market, like for example, we looked at the housing industry, and we acknowledged that at the entry level, new home buyers or first time home buyers, one of the challenges would be to have that 10% down payment in order to actually purchase a house, right? So what we introduced in 2019 is we introduced what we call rent to own. It is a product whereby your landlord is the bank, and we will actually purchase the unit, and you will identify the unit, and over the next 5 years, up to 5 years, for example, you can actually rent the property from Maybank, and subsequently at the end of year 5 or even before, you're able to actually purchase that unit based on the original price that you entered into when you actually signed the contract. So it's the contract under Islamic finance is called Ijara Mutahiyah Bitamlik, leasing or renting with a view to ownership. So you can see that there are quite distinct products coming out into the market now, being introduced by Islamic financial institutions, and I think that will continue. So initially, Rizal, when we discussed earlier during the segment, products which are similar, and increasingly you find there are also products which starts to actually create a distinction between what is being offered under the Islamic financial services industry compared to the conventional system.
But let's talk about your Islamic wealth management solution that you launched recently, which covers all 5 essential elements of IWM. You've got wealth creation, wealth accumulation, wealth protection, purification, and also distribution. Share with us briefly the details of each of the element and what sets your products apart from what other banks are offering.
Okay. So it started with a discussion about how do we actually assist our customers through their life journey. And Rizal, as you mentioned, the first 3 parts, like for example, the part about creation, accumulation, protection, those are products which are well defined and quite well known in the market, banking products as well as takaful products. But we do find that quite a large number of our customers, when they actually open an account with a bank, Maybank or any other bank, they will have a long-term relationship with the institution.
For example, as you start to work, that account will be with you for a long time. And we find that as our customers start to actually grow, whether they become more affluent, whether they take on additional responsibilities by having a family, by buying a car, a house, different requirements, and subsequently, as they get older, they start to think about how do I achieve financial independence, how do I plan for my retirement and take care of my family.
We realized that banks are in a unique position to be able to actually assist. And we find that these are the same services and products. We ourselves, not just we, the banker, but we, the individual, I think it appeals to all of us. How do we plan for beyond our working life? How do we plan for our beneficiaries during those times when we may no longer be there for them? So when we looked at the spectrum of relationships that we had, we felt that it is something that we can actually come as a solution for our customer, because you would want to actually, or you would trust an institution that has been with you for a long time. Because if you take a mortgage, for example, from a financial institution, that is a long-term relationship. And if you take an insurance policy, for example, that is a long-term relationship. So in the case of takaful, for example, it's a long-term relationship. And we find that if you need to actually plan for all these things, you may need to sometimes approach, or in the past, approach at least 3, 4, sometimes even 5 entities. Now, who would have visibility should anything happen to you? Very, very few are able to actually say, I can deal with one entity or one institution that I can entrust. They will take care of my express wishes, my needs, as well as to ensure that what I leave behind, my beneficiaries.
That was how we actually came up with the idea of we have an opportunity here to actually serve our customers better.
Okay.
We have an opportunity here to also have a longer-term relationship, and we find that those who actually take on Islamic finance facilities and Islamic wealth management, there is the element of purification. Zakat is an obligation, and then also from an ibadah standpoint, sadaqah, and then of course there is wakaf. So we are quite closely linked from a zakat perspective, the one that we pay zakat, quite closely linked to the Majlis Agama Islam Negeri the Ma'ins. And we have run programs based on zakat and sadaqah and even Wakaf, we have been supporting the Mayans. We feel that we have this platform. It's a natural progression to also share this with our customers. Zakat, for example, to MTU, during the MCO, for example, we did see a spike in terms of payment of Zakat Fitrah during the recent Ramadan, and last year, about customers wanting to actually use that platform to actually meet their obligations. And finally, Rizal, the fifth pillar, which is estate planning and distribution.
Okay.
We have the resources, we have the entity within the Maybank Group to be able to actually serve the customer better. And our value proposition here is that for all the elements that are required under Islamic wealth management, there will be a single touch point. You approach a relationship manager, as you described it just now, Rizal, and we should be able to address your needs and your requirements. So that's the reason why I think from our perspective and our standpoint, we feel that this is a product which will have strong traction with our customers. And then on the flip side, we want to ensure that when we actually establish a relationship with any customer, we are able to meet their requirements and their needs.
On that note, thank you very much Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Maybank Islamic Bhd, Datuk Mohamed Rafique Merican membincangkan berkenaan dengan inovasi dan juga solusi untuk pelanggan kewangan Islam dan juga apakah peluang yang diberikan oleh Maybank Islamic Bhd untuk menguruskan ataupun pengurusan kekayaan dan juga pengurusan harta dalam kewangan Islam. Teruskan bersama kami di Astro AWANI untuk perkembangan terkini dalam dan juga luar negara, dan juga jika anda dapat lihat di kaca TV anda pada ketika ini, anda juga boleh lawati laman web kami untuk perkembangan terkini berkenaan dengan proses vaksinasi. Dan teruskan bersama kami di Astro AWANI, berita segenap dimensi dan juga saluran berita paling dipercayai di Malaysia. Saya Rizal Zulkafli, salam hormat.